everyone. I'm Elisa Sherman. I'm the CEO of Ellementa. I'm also author of 12 books. One of them happens to be Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. That's my most recent. And the previous one is The Happy, Healthy Nonprofit. So I'm always excited to have authors here on this women's wellness series that I produce every Wednesday and Sunday. This author happens to be extra special. Why, do you ask? Because she is a dear friend. We've known each other for many, many moons. I don't know, Robin, how long have we known each other? Like 15?
I just milestone birthday yesterday, which I will not reveal, but it's been a while. Yes,
it has. So if we were working together on one of your projects called Motherhood Later for moms who decide to have kids later, women who decide to have kids later, then my daughter must have been barely one. So that has to be at least 14 years ago.
Yeah, because my son is now 17 and I launched it. He was less than 2.
Wow. So, okay. All right.
But I knew you before that. I knew you before we were moms. It's got to be at least 20 years.
It's got to be at least 20 years. Do you happen to remember? Somebody asked me the other day, how do you know Robin? I'm like, I don't remember. Do you remember?
I don't either. Well, you were a New York gal.
Yeah, we were in New York City.
And I know you were doing tech because you had your cyber girl.
Right.
And it was back then that we connected. But why or how, I don't
Did you go to a Web Girls meeting? I had started this organization for women to teach women about the internet. Did you go to one of those?
Sure I did. Probably.
Could have been something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, reminiscing, nostalgia, history. I'm really happy to have you here, Robin. And I think we've got a lot of people out there who are interested in what you have to say. Our topic today is love during the pandemic. And hold up your book really quick. Robin is the author of several books, including How to Marry a Mensch. Ta-da! I love the zoom in focus part of the program.
There's a poster back there, but
and there sure is. I was commenting on that earlier. I'm like, I love your set. So, Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about your background, because I'm calling you a love coach plus author. But what is your background? How did this all come about?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's so fun to be here and to chat with you and everybody out there. The world needs more mensches. And for those who don't know, do you know, how would you define a mensch, Elisa?
How would I define a mensch?
Yeah.
I would define a mensch as a nice guy. I don't know.
Okay, that's a little piece of it.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be a guy. It could be a woman.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I actually did not know that. I thought there had to be like a female version of the name.
Well, some people think that, and I joke and say menschette, but actually, no, there doesn't need to be a menschette. It's a universal, but the origins are Yiddish. So if you looked it up in certain dictionaries that had it, it would actually say decent, responsible person. So there isn't a sex, right. But if you go back earlier than that, the origins probably would be male. But so I can understand why you would think that, but it's really, it's so mainstream now compared to what it used to be. But I like to dig deeper and say that it's not just decent, responsible. It's really honorable, somebody with integrity, somebody who's going to stand the test of time. Because I get asked a lot, how do you know if someone's a mensch? And why would you want one? That's just one reason. Someone who's going to have your back. Someone who you don't have to question. Like, you don't have to say to yourself, are they a mensch? Because they'll show up and you'll know.
I have to interrupt this program for a moment. 2 things. One is, I wanted you to talk about your background first.
Okay.
But I'm going to take a quick moment to just remind people who are attending live that we do have a giveaway. If you're in the Zoom, not watching live on Facebook, but if you're in the Zoom, we are giving away a product today, and it's called Joya De-Stress. It's a dietary supplement spray with vitamin Bs and herbs and CBD, hemp-derived. So I just wanted to mention that really quick. So if you're sticking around, I'm going to do a random drawing at the end. We have heard a rumor that Robin is also interested in trying this product. All right, Robin, I
Yeah.
really do want you to give some of your background first, then we'll dive into our topic. Sorry to interrupt you, but I
No.
really
Okay.
love for you to promote your background and who you are.
Yeah. Well, you
Okay.
can see that I get zealous, I should say, about the mensch subject. So I can't wait to get into that.
Definitely.
My background is that it's so varied, but essentially the reason I wrote my first book, which was How to Meet a Mensch in New York, which led to the one I just held up, How to Marry a Mensch, is because I was out there just feeling the pressures of trying to meet someone, trying to date, trying to enjoy my life at the same time. And I'm kind of dating myself a little. It feels like a dinosaur now. But when I wrote the first book, it was like on the cusp of the web. So we didn't have the resources that people have now to research and just Google anything and everything that you want to find. So to figure out where to go and what to do felt like such a job. And I was reading New York Magazine, when Time Out New York, and I became kind of the go-to person in my circle who was always sort of figuring out the cool stuff to do. And I was like exhausted. And I just felt like, is there a Zaggity type guide? Wouldn't that be helpful in this context? And that was how the first book was born. And prior to that, I came out of PR. I have a background in marketing. I always wanted to write a book. I was writing as a kid in college. I used to write for various school newspapers. I was the arts editor of one of the school newspapers. So it always felt natural I would do a book one day. It was not my plan at all to write a dating book. It just kind of happened out of personal need. And for me, that's kind of the essence of my life, and all my career steps have been that if I have a need, I've always felt like I am not alone. And what can I do to help myself that would also help other people?
Nice.
So that was the birth of the first book. And then from How to Meet a Mensch in New York, the press was so extraordinary. And it was like shocking to me almost, because I have a background in PR. And with that, I still didn't see it coming. And I wound up on the Today Show and CNN and New York. Did interviews in London, like overseas media embraced it. It was really like off the charts.
Wow.
And I started lecturing all over the place, Canyon Ranch and Mohawk Mountain House. I made an appearance at Macy's, Herald Square. Learning Annex, places, bookstores would seem the obvious, but I did so much more. Off-Broadway shows would bring me in to dish and do talkbacks with the audience, almost like the doctor is in Peanuts. I was like the Lucy character, in a booth in the lobby. Go ask the love coach. Go talk to Robin over there. So it was so much fun.
Yeah.
But what became obvious was that, and one of my friends said to me, you really should offer personal advice. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds interesting, but what would that look like exactly? And I had no idea, because I'm not a matchmaker. And coaching was a little bit becoming a thing, but not, I was kind of ahead of the cusp of that too. So I had no idea what to call myself. And I was doing an interview actually with Joan Hamburg on WOR Radio. I was a regular guest on her show. She was so supportive of my book and all my work. Wow. And I decided just to put it out there and see if they shall come. And they did. And I thought, now my phone is ringing. Now I better figure out what am I doing here? And who am I? So I first called myself a personal trainer for your love life. Because
gosh, that's so cute. I love
right?
it.
Because I thought, like, how many people join a gym and don't go? Like, it's such a common thing. So I thought of that in the context of dating. How many people feel like they're doing so much, if they're going here, they're going there, but how are they actually behaving, when they're there? It's not necessarily simpatico. So that was one thing. But then I thought, that's kind of a long phrase, personal trainer for your love life. It's not like a quick, elevator pitch. So then I thought, well, I'm like a social strategist, kind of. Like, I'm also, maybe that's a phrase I could use, and that is actually what I do, is I help people figure out where to go and what to do. But that sounded so like methodical.
It sounded very businessy.
Yeah, exactly. So then I came up with love coach, I'm helping people find love. And I actually think I coined the phrase. I can't prove it, but I have the domain, lovecoach.com. And from that came my second book, which was How to Marry a Mensch. Because at that point I had stories, I had been working with singles as a love coach. And I also, what I love about this book is that, and it speaks to those who have even met a mensch, because I interviewed people who did. I think you're in the book, I believe, now that I think of that. I believe.
I don't know. It better be my husband.
I should have known that. I needed to check that out, but I think that you are in the book.
So what year did you write it?
This was 2006.
It's very possible because I had just married a man.
Yeah,
in 2004. In fact, yesterday was our anniversary.
Yeah. So if you want to know Elise's story, get the book.
Oh my gosh. I wasn't even expecting that. And I did not remember that, memory.
It just came to me right now too. I'm like, oh yeah, because I wanted to share stories of people who, combination of those who didn't necessarily think they actually would meet a mensch, or even just meet anyone, never mind a mensch, just struggling to date, and to really decide that it was important, that was a value that they valued. Because my hope is always at the end of the day that people will reach that conclusion, because you deserve one. So you really want to have that for yourself. So that's how that book came. And then I just kept on, lecturing and doing my thing. So that's kind of the backstory.
That's great. I am so glad you gave some of the backstory. And now we can dive back into the topic at hand. Yeah. We were beginning to talk about what is a mensch. You said that it was definitely not just men. A mensch could be a person, decent. But go back. Tell me some more. Tell us all some more.
Yeah, I mean, decent's like the most basic. Somebody with integrity, somebody who can, people throw around the words kindness. That's like, I don't want to say overused because I love that word, but what does that really mean at the end of the day? And it's not just being kind in the world, which is wonderful, but also being kind to yourself. Being a mensch to yourself, raising a mensch. We were talking a little bit about that. I might throw that into the chat, but for those who are parents, and I am a mom, I feel like now more than ever, with everything going on in this world, to raise kids, it feels like a responsibility to teach kids to have an awareness of being decent. And that doesn't seem like so much to ask, but yet, it's been interesting because in my talks, one of the things that I've always questioned is, are mensches born or bred? Like, where does that come from, really? Because what if someone isn't raised with that mindset? Not everyone has parents who have that skill, who have it on their radar. And you can't fault someone if they weren't raised that way, but can that be cultivated? And if so, how? And I would like to think it can be, but first you have to be self-aware enough to want it, and to see it as viable and desirable.
So I definitely want us to later talk a little bit more about raising a mensch, but I also like this line of conversation about cultivating, what is it called? Menschiness? but let's kind of go first along the lines of, why is it important to find a mensch?
Because at the end of the day, you want someone who's going to show up for you. You want someone who will stand the test of time. You want somebody who will put you first. You want someone who you don't have to question. One of the things that I noticed when I was writing the first book, especially, and I remember I had a friend back in college who was dating this guy, and she really liked him a lot. But every time the date was over, she had all these doubts, and my phone would ring. I wasn't even a love coach then, but I was like a meant-to-be love coach, I guess, back in the day. And she would be, well, he's not calling. And I don't know. And suddenly she had like this insecurity. It was as if it didn't even matter how good the date was. Like that just went out the window. And one of the things that I learned, and I always like to share, is that how you feel in between the dates is as important, if not more important, than how you feel on the date itself. And so what I wound up picking up from her was that I don't think you're on the same page. He might really like you, but you shouldn't be questioning that much. And finally, one day I said to her, and it was like a hard thing to share, but I said, I think he just wants to go to these places because he was taking her to these amazing restaurants and she loved it. And she felt like it was special for her. And my feeling was it actually wasn't. That he wanted to go, and that if it wasn't her, he would have taken someone else. Just
Oh.
because of the high level of doubt she was having, in between. And ultimately, sure enough, I was right.
Wow.
And they weren't on the same page. And you could see, I could see it. She didn't want to see it. And I raised this because you asked about why is a mensch important. And if someone is a mensch, you don't have to ask the question. If you're asking the question, you know the answer, because a mensch will just prove themselves and you won't wonder.
What if though those doubts or those questionings are a person's own insecurity? How do you know, where do you separate? How can you tell if it's I'm just insecure versus there are signals and signs that are leading to that kind of doubt?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of that is that you want to try to look for patterns, if there is one. Like, does this come up for you all the time? Like, if it's one person, like in this case, it was this gal and this one guy. And with her, it was a constant questioning, over time. Like, it never got better. So in that instance, I would say to myself, well, how long should your personal insecurity last? I could see maybe the first, 3 dates, 5 dates, something like that. But after that, if you're seeing someone regularly and still asking, then if you think it's your own insecurity, I would suggest to you that you might want to talk to a therapist.
Right, yes.
Seriously,
Yeah.
and just own your stuff, you need to work on yourself too, because if you're not sure, and actually a lot of therapists send their clients to me, because it really is important to be in a healthy, happy place before you start to look for someone, because otherwise you're not even going to know who you are, what you want, why you're feeling what you're feeling. And you got to do the work before you do the hunt, so to speak. Just thought of that right
now. Yeah. I don't know. I get it. The main topic that we definitely want to touch on here is the pandemic.
Yeah.
For those who are watching far into the future, I certainly hope we are no longer talking about something you're going through. But at the moment, we are all in this boat together. We are all isolating to different degrees. Some of us actually quarantining ourselves because of potential exposures and protecting our loved ones. I mean, you don't want to get too up close to anybody. And the idea of being in a shared space, much less finding a place that you could actually safely go on a date. I mean, these are some challenges here. So talk to us about, really, this is the way. In a perfect world, in our previous world, what was it like? What should it have been like to find that mensch? And how is it different today?
Well, there was so many choices before. I mean, a lot of people do online dating, and I will dig into that, a little bit. But that was certainly going on before. That's going on possibly even more now. So that was always a big outlet. But before, of course, you had in-person meeting options. So what I would have said before, and I would still like to throw in there, is the notion of doing volunteer work. I'm a big fan of doing anything with continuity, for one, which doesn't have to be volunteer work, but often that's an element of it. Because if you're doing something more than once, A, it takes the pressure off. B, you get a chance to see some of the same faces over and over again. So in a more possibly relaxed way. So if you didn't speak to them the first time, maybe by the 5th time, you might be able to make that connection. And then as far as the volunteer work goes, if you want to meet a mensch, which is a decent, caring, kind person, again, on the most basic level. Someone who would get involved with a cause or support something speaks to that kind of a person,
Wow.
verbatim. So that's kind of like an obvious thing. And so pre-pandemic, I would have said to people, pick causes that you love and get out there, get in the trenches. And especially if you want to go to a fundraiser, for example, fundraisers are often big ticket events that people can't always afford, but you can volunteer for that organization and work at the fundraiser. And then it doesn't cost you anything and you're doing good and you're meeting. So it's kind of a win-win, for everyone. So that would have been one thing that I would definitely suggest. And then beyond that, I'm a fan of, I don't love blatant singles things. If that's your thing, great. I would never tell someone don't do something, but I would always tell them don't only do something, because you need to mix it up and you need to, try to open your mind, because people, I have found, tend to be creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And we all are, kind of, to a certain extent. Some people are bolder than others, but we all have our comfort zones. We all have things, especially now, like during the pandemic. It's a time that people are seeking safety,
Right.
Just security, comfort again, familiar. And that makes sense now. But prior to the pandemic, especially, if you were seeking those things out and it wasn't working for you, then it's time to shake that up. Like, you can't just stay in your comfort zone forever if it's not getting you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I do as a love coach with singles is really try to get people to think out of that box and to just try something. Even if you think it's not something you would ever embrace, you might be really surprised.
Example. So for example, something that would be way out there that somebody has done, maybe that you've heard of, or that you would suggest, that what would be something totally different that somebody could do?
Well, I could even speak to myself, for example. It's not a dating thing, but it was kind of a big thing for me. And it could be a socializing thing. I never learned to swim laps. Like, I never learned to do the crawl. Like, growing up, I learned to do the backstroke and I could do the breaststroke. I don't know why I never learned the crawl. I just didn't. And my son was young then, and we were going to our pool all the time. And I just had this aha moment one day. And I was like, I want to be that person in the pool when I'm 90 years old, God willing, and to swim laps because it's great exercise. It looks like fun. However, I was petrified. I was petrified of deep water. I didn't know how to swim. I didn't want to put my face in the water. I had so many negatives. I had so many reasons why I did not want to do this. I pushed past it anyway and said, you know what? But yeah, I'm just going to do it. And I got in that pool and people helped me. And then eventually I took a few lessons. And to this day, I love it. I love swimming. I love treading. I'm not afraid of deep water at all anymore. And I share this story because I didn't see it coming. Like, in a million years, I never thought that being in a pool would become my happy place.
Wow.
Because I had every fear around it and every mental roadblock. So as a single person, I might suggest you take swim lessons.
Well, I was just going to say, so if you hadn't have been married at the time, if you were single, that's
Right.
putting yourself into a new environment, a new experience, an instructor or a lifeguard, or
Yeah.
I could see that being quite helpful.
Yeah. You just don't know. Other examples could be, let's say you never thought you would be a hiker.
Mm-hmm.
And if I said to you, you know what, I heard of this hike, because I do get very specific with my clients, and I will actually create a plan and tell them where to go and what to do, and I feed them information. I don't just say, like, go on a hike. I will tell them what hike, to go on. But what if I said to you, well, I know you're not really outdoorsy, and I hear that you're saying that, but I think you should try this hike on Saturday. It's not a hard hike. I get it if you're not a jock. You can walk it. I just want you to, show up.
Yeah.
Would you go? Are you willing to do that? I've had other clients, for example, I've had women who come to me and who don't like sports, at all. And I get it. I'm not the most sports driven person either, but I had this example once where I thought the Special Olympics is an interesting nonprofit organization. And one of the clients I was working with, I thought, I was just feeling like that might click for them. And I said, okay, I know you're not into sports, but I think you might want to consider volunteering for them, because I just think that might be a fit. And that was just completely, it wasn't crazy, but it just wasn't on her radar, like, at all. And I wound up convincing her to go. And, whether or not you meet the one at something that you do, you never know, when no one has a crystal ball. But my belief is it's about living fuller. It's about opening yourself up. It's about making new friends, just meeting new people and enlarging your circle, because you just don't know where it's going to come from. And you meet one person and it leads to someone else. So it's just you don't have to be wild and crazy, but just to think about what just might be different that you just didn't think you would ever try. And are you actually willing to do that?
And I think that gets you unstuck. I think a lot of people, singles, divorcees, they tend to get stuck. And like you said, creatures of habit. So shaking it up, I could see that expands your network. But now let's really zero in on pandemic, expanding your network, meeting new people outside of your household, making contact. I mean, all of this sounds terrifying now. So how do you morph the kind of advice that you're giving for this time, for going through such a difficult time that we're going through?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I respect singles and how they feel at this time, because I recognize that it is difficult. So I just want to put that out there, that I understand how this might feel for you. What I do want to say is that it doesn't have to be a time that feels like a bust. And the reason I say that is because, in part, I think it's a good time to do the homework. So some of what I'm suggesting, and again, what I help with is coming up with ideas, but there's no reason that you can't try to do that for yourself as well, if you're inclined. If you can think about things that you would like to be doing, things that you never explored, organizations you might want to tap into, whatever, there's a lot of research that you can do. First of all, you can start to get on lists. And a lot of these places are, in fact, doing virtual events. So why, I get it's not the same. I understand you might prefer to be out there. And I think you can get out there also to a certain extent. And I'll touch base on that. But I think just virtually, don't discount those opportunities, even if it's a networking group. I've had a lot of women clients, and I work with men and women, all ages, all backgrounds. And I have found with some women that many have come to me and actually said, you know what, I'd like to meet the one, but I could also use new friends. A lot of my friends are busy or married or just not so available when I am. How do I do that? And I think the pandemic is actually an amazing time to do that, because networking groups and other organizations that might be of interest to you that might have felt like so much legwork in the past, because people were busy before the pandemic, and now people are busy in a different way. So it might have felt hard to even get around to some of these places. Now you don't have to go anywhere. You're going to show up in a Zoom room, and you never know who you're going to meet. I did a Zoom recently, I should share, and actually a match was possibly made in that room.
You're kidding me.
In the chat room. I am not kidding you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah.
So you don't know. That's the first thing. So jump onto those virtual opportunities. I think it's a great time for that. And as far as getting together and the whole social distance thing, I think it's possible. I mean, I know people dating at this time. You want to be careful. You don't want to let it slip. I could see that you might, want to be a little cozy and, miss the romantic potential there. You want to be smart about it, but there's no reason that you could go out to have lunch with someone on a bench and social distance. I know it's a little weird, but you could do it. And I absolutely know people who are doing that.
Yeah, outdoor dining, picnicking, hiking, as you mentioned, or even just walking.
Absolutely.
And masking up maybe initially. I'm wondering, hopefully this is not going to continue going on, but I'm not too optimistic that we're looking at anything ending anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's going to come down to COVID tests, really, before somebody goes on a genuine date or makes physical contact, if that becomes something that people will entertain doing. It sounds weird and extreme. It sounds sci-fi. It sounds almost unnatural, and yet, in a sense, it's smart. I mean, in the era of AIDS, a lot of people were really talking and asking the question, "Have you been tested?" And there's not any similar kinds of protections really, for this kind of virus. So, yeah, what a weird time.
Yeah.
So
you raise a good point. I also wanted to say one other thing that just came for me is that on the subject of menschhood, that how somebody shows up at a time like this is really telling.
Yeah.
You know, how they're behaving towards you, or because everyone's reacting to this time differently. Right. You know, there are some people who are just embracing it because they love staying home, and it's just kind of more of the same, and it's like validating to them almost. And then there are other people who, like myself, for example, and many who are more social, you know, who are really feeling it. So I think it's important to honor the feelings of other people and to respect that everyone's in a different place, and to see how someone shows up for you and their level of respect. And is this someone, if you're having a hard day, can you talk to them now? You know, can you have those heartfelt conversations? Because what I've been hearing a lot during this pandemic time is that that's happening. I mean, I've had conversations like that, not for dating, but just amongst colleagues and other people, and that have really been meaningful and deeper than they would have ever been had there not been a pandemic. So I think in that sense, it's kind of interesting to get to know somebody at this time, because the conversations can dig a little deeper. The only thing I would say to that, the only warning I would give is that, and I would have said this even pre-pandemic, and this is a little bit of the challenge, because pre-pandemic, I would have suggested don't have those conversations. Don't get too deep, too much, too fast, like make the date. Because what happens is when you do that, you create expectations. You know, you start to have feelings. I've had clients who actually fell in love with someone before they even met because of just the nature of the conversation they had. And then you take that chance of getting together, and are you going to click or not? You know, and then what if you don't? You're already let down because you reached a conclusion in your mind. The pandemic makes it a little tougher possibly, because so much of what we have is conversation now. And it is so tempting to just let it all hang out, so to speak. But then where do you go from there? So the only thing I would suggest is be yourself, but don't give away the shop. You know, keep a little something for yourself, be a little guarded, understand too that some people are more needy than others. You know, and needy is not necessarily the same as a romantic connection.
Interesting. That is an interesting way of putting it. I'm thinking now, you brought up a great point. In this time, there is a way to be a mensch. There's also ways previous to pandemic, currently in pandemic, that show that you're not a mensch, that other person is not. Warning signs, bells that go off. In the pandemic, just in the examples you gave, I really think that someone who respects your level of care and safety, personal safety, the use of a personal equipment, personal protective equipment, whatever you feel is right for you to be safe, a mensch would be one who would acknowledge and respect and mirror that to you. Would that be correct? Versus somebody who mocks you or rejects those kinds of safety measures, possibly not considering you and your needs or your health, etc., would be the opposite. What's the opposite of a mensch?
A jerk.
I was waiting for some kind of fancy name. Okay, yes. So to me, that's a really clear view. What are
Yeah.
some other warning signs, pre-pandemic or current, that person just may not be a mensch? Because a lot of people come on really well at that beginning stage. It's that honeymoon stage. Everyone's putting their best foot forward. And a lot of people are very good at hiding some of their serious issues at the beginning. So, what are some red
Yeah.
flags, some warnings?
That's such a big question, and a really good question. I think part of it is that you have to trust your gut. I mean, a little, which sounds so vague, but that's a little bit of what I touched on earlier with the gal who was dating the guy who just felt like, to me, he wanted to go to these places and it wasn't unique to her. I think she was feeling the red flags, but didn't want to acknowledge it, within herself. So I think a little bit, without being specific about the red flag, but just learning to trust yourself when something feels like it might be off, or, you know what, I'm not liking this, like if he wants to come back to your house, let's say, prematurely, and you're not comfortable with that, especially now, around the pandemic. And you raised such an important point about respecting someone's personal safety always, but especially now. And that means different things to different people. Someone might be fine holding hands even now, when you're not. Someone might want to give you a hug, and that's not the greatest thing to do right now. But even beforehand, those things could come up, those differences, might arise. I'm also kind of old fashioned, in the sense that pre-pandemic, and it's maybe a little bit different now, but pre-pandemic, I never had a problem with a woman initiating a conversation or helping to facilitate meeting. But my hope was always that the man would do the asking out, that he would do the first ask, just because you want to know, like, would he, would that happen? And then you could go from there. Now during the pandemic, it's a little bit tricky because people are having these conversations they probably wouldn't have had before. And like one of the clients I've been working with, for example, and she could not get together with him because there was like a distance between them. And so she was going to do the Zoom date, which I wound up helping to guide her through. But her question to me was, how do you transition from conversations that are feeling heavy, feeling meaningful, feeling heartfelt, but is that a romance? Or is that partly the times? So I said to her, well, why don't you invite him for a Zoom dinner, to set the tone as if it's a date, so that you're sending that signal so you can see how he responds. Now, normally I wouldn't have said, well, don't you do the inviting, let him. But now, because it's a weird time, I'm like, just do it, but just don't stand on ceremony right now. I wouldn't do it all the time, but just go for it. And she did. So she set the table with roses, and she had two plates out. I said, dress the part, dress a little nicer. And she sent the clear signal that I'm thinking this could be a date kind of thing. And are we on the same page? And she's still trying to figure that out. So that's a whole other story. But I think that's what I'm seeing people do now, is doing the Zoom date thing.
Virtual dating. I think you could get really creative with it. You could also both be outdoors doing an activity and being together. I mean, there's different ways of being together now. In fact, you have to create new ways of being together and connecting. Heck, people could play chess or checkers virtually and make those moves. People do that all the time online anyway. Scrabble.
Exactly.
Find a guy who watch a movie together. Oh, well, of course, watching a movie together. Even Zoom and Facebook, etc., have those watch party features.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just all of a sudden it just dawned on me. None of these things, since I'm not dating, none of these things had even cropped up in my head. I want to remind everyone who the people who are in Zoom right now live, and we've got a lot of people here. Please take a moment, if you can get to the chat, and type in some questions if you have any. I don't want us to leave without addressing some of your questions. Those of you on Facebook Live, I'm not able to toggle over right now. I've tried to do it before, and woof, it didn't work out very well. So reminder to register for the Zoom next time. But this is really informative, really interesting. And this pandemic is turning everything on its head. I would like to talk a little bit about the topic that you brought up before about raising a mensch. Right now, any of those of us who are parents or parents to be, the times are so different. Everything we knew about parenting has complexity now that we never anticipated, stress that we never anticipated. But in its basic form, what does it mean as a parent to raise a mensch? And then the next topic before we go, I also want to talk about how do you become a mensch if you recognize that maybe you're not that menschy. So let's talk about the parenting piece and how do you raise a mensch?
Well, first you have to want to, and to even think about it, because that's not a given. Unfortunately, look at the world, we can see that. And if you don't know how, then I would try to seek out people who you feel are doing it. And in your community, it could be through a church, it could be through a synagogue, it could be through a school, it could be through a community center. I mean, there are good people in the world, and they do exist in all different places, but you have to want to become that and model that. And that's really the key with raising a mensch, is who we are and how we show up is what our kids see.
Right.
And we can teach them what we want, but the best way to do that is by example. And when my son was little, for example, I always felt like I wanted him to have a sense of gratitude and to know that not everybody in this world has the same things, whether it's material or an opportunity for experience or whatever. We all live different lives. So very early on, we would bake cookies for the local fire department, take him to the police department, that because he's a firefighter now. But that was always his sensibility. But I wanted him to give thanks to people in the community who were doing good things, who should not be taken for granted. I used to take him to North Shore Animal League because he always loved dogs. We don't have one, but that was the closest thing we could do, is do some dog give back. So we would bring sheets and pillows and towels to North Shore Animal League because they needed them for the cages, and for the animal care. So, and those were such easy things to do, and it came kind of naturally to me, but it doesn't necessarily to everyone. So I think if you want to do it, just to seek out those opportunities. And why does it matter? Because nothing really matters more, if you think about that. I mean, kids are the future of this world. And it doesn't have to come even just from us. Parents get into overload sometimes. We're all doing so much, especially now. I mean, it's multitasking and having to make school decisions. And I mean, I had to do that last week with my husband. It's really been quite overwhelming, the choices we have to make right now, because none of it's really great. So if being a mensch either isn't natural to you, or you don't know how to extend that, or you're just too overwhelmed, it can come from someone else. It could come from another family member. It can come from a neighbor. It can come from your rabbi or the principal of a school or a clergyman, or it doesn't have to be a task that you feel like you have to take full responsibility for. If that just feels too much out of your bandwidth. I mean, yes, you should, to a certain extent. You are the parent. Right. But sometimes it takes more, sometimes
it takes a village.
It does take a village, and we can't do it all. So we can do a piece. And then it would be great if there were other people who could embrace that too, if you have that need. Um,
Hey, it's someone
it's
calling.
live,
What?
live.
I need a love coach.
Right. Exactly. I'm raising a match. Help. Don't forget to do it.
So here is something I think that even what you're saying about raising a mensch, there's a lot of pieces in there that seem to be also helpful if you want to become a mensch, if you've recognized that maybe you're not the nicest person or you've been told that you're not the nicest person. Some of
Right.
these techniques can potentially help as well. And I would think that a mensch attracts mensch, like mensch attracts mensch. I would hope.
One would hope. Yes,
One would
exactly.
hope.
Yeah.
So finding a role model,
Yeah.
I think, is really good. This is not exactly on a dating front, but I've always considered one of my girlfriends who I've known since I was pregnant and she was pregnant with we were pregnant together with our daughters, that she was in a sense a role model to me. I call her the Earth Mama. She was always calmer and much more deliberate about the things she thought of, said, and did. And then watching the way she bonded with her daughter. I had postpartum depression, so it was extremely difficult that first year. But even just mimicking her, some of the actions, she was a role model for me, and I was modeling what
Yep.
she was showing in order to bond with my daughter and to demonstrate that kind of behavior to my daughter. So
That's great.
that whole idea of finding a role model, finding somebody to, well, besides a love coach like you, finding somebody who can reinforce that good behavior in you or point out, one of those things that we do sometimes in our family is we have a code word. Well, if somebody's getting snippy, we can say this code word, and it's non-offensive way of bringing to that person's attention that, hey, yeah, you're getting a little non-menchy. What are some other tips for somebody who wants to just increase their menchiness?
Well, you actually made me think of something when you were talking about role modeling. Like for kids, another way would be to get them involved, let's say in Cub Scouts or, some, doesn't have to be Cub Scouts per se, but just any kind of club or community service activity that exists for youth.
Although right now, how are they doing it? Pandemic-wise,
right, I don't
but
think
if they did it virtually, I think it would be just as helpful. Different.
that might be happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's, and there probably will be, if not now, I would say come fall, depending on what happens with schools and such. I have no doubt there'll be tons of extracurricular virtual stuff happening. But to your point about being a mensch, and even as an adult, it actually came to my attention that there are some organizations that school men in menschhood.
And there are also organizations that school women in womanhood and mothers in motherhood.
Right.
Whatever that exactly means, I think the core of it is self-love first. I mean, you've got to be good, like you had said earlier. You got to own your stuff. You got to work on your stuff. You've got to be a whole person, because seeking out a mensch, seeking out another person in your life should never be to fill a hole, right? I mean, is that
spot on? Yep.
Okay? Yeah, that's what I have always believed, is that you need to be a whole person and come to a relationship with another whole person. And I would think that some red flags could be, you mentioned the neediness, over dependency, suspicion and jealousy. Those are definitely signs of a non-mensch.
Yeah.
But a mensch is most likely a person who first and foremost is good with themselves and takes care of themselves and is self-aware, that self-awareness. If both parties are self-aware, I think you can have a much better relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And living authentically, especially now, because so many people are doing social media, and this is now particularly true during the pandemic. All the websites are like heating up, the dating apps and all that, because people are around and it's so easy to do. But how are you showing up on that? Are you being truthful? Does your photo represent you? Are you putting yourself out there in a way that's genuine?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that you need to do because, and you mentioned earlier, does mensch attract mensch? That is possible, but only if you're real. You need to
Right.
walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's like throwing around the word kindness, be kind, be good. But what does that mean if you're not getting behind it? Do you even know how to really do that?
How do you really do that?
By example, take action. Don't just post on social media. Do something about it. Even if it's the most simple thing, help somebody else. Smile at somebody else. Don't judge other people.
Mm-hmm.
Have empathy. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. For kids, don't bully. You don't know what's going on in someone else's world.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reach conclusions about people based on nothing, or what you think, how you think they're probably feeling, or what the experience, especially now during a pandemic, what you think that looks like and feels like to other people. Because how do you know, really? Not everybody puts everything out there, and social media is a weird animal, and some people just rely, on that. And I can tell you that it's not the same. If you want to make heartfelt connections now, it could even be someone in your circle that you just never really had that conversation with before. And now you just decide to take that on. Pick up the phone, text somebody, email someone and say to them, you know what? Because we don't know when we're going to see certain people in our lives again.
Right.
I mean, I found myself doing this. I'll email someone and say, hey, because maybe I would have said to them, would you like to have coffee one day? That's not happening right now. Not.
But you could do it on Zoom. You could have a coffee meeting on Zoom.
Exactly. Yeah. But so make the ask.
Yeah.
Put it out there, even if it's not someone you ever sat down with before, but you just feel like, you know what? I'm kind of interested in them. Show that interest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you have to lose? And let people know. I mean, I said this pre-pandemic, and I would say it even now. If you're single and you're looking for someone, don't presume people in your circle will fix you up because you're single. Because you know what? Everybody's busy. You're not necessarily high on their radar. So say it. Let people know what you want. If you're open to a fix-up, tell them, you know what? If you happen to meet someone, or if you happen to know someone, or your cousin, or just keep me in mind. Let's not just, presume that people will do what we would do maybe, randomly or easily, because we're all different. So
very good tips. I think those are good wrap-up tips for us. You can find love in the pandemic, right? You're not pessimistic about this. You're optimistic, right?
Yes, it's totally possible. Just you have to feel that. And I could understand if you might get down, because people have said that to me, because it looks different, but different doesn't mean impossible.
All
That's
right.
the thing.
Good. That is great advice. I want to remind everyone that we were doing a giveaway, and I have picked a random winner. But first, let me show you what you're winning. It's called Joya De-Stress. It's a dietary supplement spray. It's got hemp-derived CBD in it, as well as some other herbs, lots of the vitamin B stuff, which is really, really good for de-stressing. And it's got a fresh minty flavor, so it can double as a breath mint. It's great. I am really enjoying it, and who couldn't use a little de-stressing? So thank you, Joya, for offering this to one lucky winner. And I am scrolling. And the winner that, by the way, I go to random.org and pick a random winner based on the number of attendees. And it's Zoe. I think it's pronounced Zoe or Zoe, C-O-E. And your last name, first initial to your last name is T. Did I say that right? Zoe T, you are a winner. So, yay, Zoe, congratulations. So, I am typing in Aliza@ellementa.com. That is my email address. Zoe, I hope that you're hearing me right now. You have won. Jill, who is also here, Jill Wayne, is going to make sure she fulfills your wonderful prize, please. You're good. You saw me. Okay. Sometimes the winners are like, they're doing the laundry or something. And they miss the fact that they've won. But she's here. And so just email me and give me your address, your mailing address to receive this. And I will copy Robin on it. So she'll know as well. So she can congratulate you. And I'll copy Jill Wayne from Joya on it as well. All right, everybody. This has been really interesting and informative, and lots of ideas, things that you've brought up, Robin, that I hadn't thought of, not just because I'm not dating, but because we really are in a different time.
Yeah.
But you're optimistic. You can
Yeah.
find love.
Yeah.
You can raise a mensch.
Raise a mensch. You can be a mensch.
Be a
you can
mensch.
date a mensch. You can just project menschhood.
Menschhood, menschiness. I still don't know what is that the word. I think that's going to be our word now. Menschiness.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining us. This hour has gone so quickly. This is a lot of fun. Robin, hold your book up one last time. You're an author, and I want to make sure we can sell some books. If anybody knows anyone who's single, if you're not single, or if you are, pick up How to Marry a Mensch. Amazing advice. And good luck, everyone. Yeah.
Lovecoach.com.
Lovecoach.com is how we find her. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.